is a new thing for me. I used to do videos back in the day, and I made some like a year ago, but I haven't thought much about YouTube for a while. I encountered difficulties with Facebook and realized I should probably pay more attention to YouTube. So here I was reading Understanding Our Mind in the teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh group and the Buddha Gang Facebook groups. But my reach is cut way back. So I better start sharing here to YouTube and let my friends know that this is what I'm going to do. And you can help me if you want. It would be very helpful. Because my reach is limited. It's difficult to spread the word. And I don't want to abandon anybody. I know there are people who appear regularly to learn, and I see them learning, and it's beautiful. And as they learn, and as I learn, our friendship deepens. So now here I am reading Understanding Our Mind. So this book is built off of 50 verses from an ancient Buddhist teacher named Vasubandhu. And he taught Abhidharma. That's like the systemization of the Dharma, the higher Dharma. And they look deeply into the teachings to clarify things. And there are different systems of this activity. So this is the context from which Vasubandhu is emerging. He has a brother named Asanga. Together, they expanded the teachings on the mind from the earlier streams of Buddhist teaching. They presented 2 new layers of the mind system. So in early Buddhism, we learn about the first 6 layers of consciousness. But really, this kind of consciousness is a certain kind of consciousness. It's dualistic. So the first 5 are the sense minds that we're all familiar with. Seeing and hearing and tasting and touching and smelling. And then there's the 6th, which is like the hub of a wheel. And it has all the other minds around it at the wheel, at the edge of the wheel. And they all connect to this 6th mind, this 6th consciousness. And this is the intellect, mano vijnana. So the other sense minds, they watch their fields for certain information. The eye sees sights, it sees light. When the eye makes contact with light, there is seeing consciousness. And the same goes for the ear. It hears a different kind of information, vibration. And when there's contact between the ear and vibration, there's hearing consciousness. And then smelling and tasting and touching are the same. But thinking is a little different because it uses the activity of the other sense minds as its field. That's what it watches. And is capable in humans of watching itself. And not only that, humans are capable of watching others' minds. We are very social creatures, and we have evolved to be able to predict each other's behavior to a certain degree. And that's how society is able to work. We develop habits or formations that allow us to interact with some degree of harmony. And that same process happens in a body, between cells. There are patterns of activity that are established which allow a group of individual things to become whole. And then this body made of trillions of cells, it feels like... One second, I gotta turn off that beep. This mind system the Buddha was talking about, which is clearly, dependent on mind, what we consider external is a part of the mind system. But this mind system, with these kinds of perceptions and this thinking mind watching it, it all supports this notion of self, which is delusion in the Buddha's teaching. And that delusion gives rise to all these unwholesome mental factors, which then give rise to unwholesome speech and action. And that makes suffering proliferate. So the verse here that we're reading is the function of store consciousness, which is to receive and maintain seeds in the mind, in the field of mind, and their habit energies, so they can manifest in the world or remain dormant. So seeds are like potentialities, and in the previous verses we've heard that this field of mind has every kind of seed, and those seeds are nourished by action, by thinking and speaking and doing. Here comes a helicopter. And now that was the verse. The function of store consciousness is to receive action and to maintain action as habit. I'm gonna wait for this helicopter to go away. So the field of mind receives action and maintains it as habit. Thich Nhat the other day when I was reading was talking about how this habit energy is also at play in our perception. We habitually perceive reality in certain ways. And according to the Buddha, we habitually perceive reality in the wrong way, which is why we're here now. we are dominated by the idea of self, Atman. But when we talk about no self, it's really useful to remember the two truths. It's the ultimate truth and the relative truth or the conventional truth. There's two layers of truth in the Buddhist teaching. So when we say no self, we're not saying that, you don't exist or you don't appear as you are now, because you do. There you are and here I am. Here we are. But ultimately, what we think we are, it can't grasp. What we think we are is not the ultimate truth. Whatever we think we are cannot be the ultimate truth. And this has to do with the features of the mind system being described in this text. It's a mind system of dualistic discrimination. Dualism can't handle whole things. Dualistic discrimination can't penetrate ultimate truths, but ultimate truths can be understood by skillfully engaging in dualistic discrimination. And it's super helpful to look at the teachings of those who have come before us, trying to do the same thing. And this is one of the reasons why I think it's a good idea for Westerners to not get caught up in sectarianism. If other people who are born into regions where it makes sense for them to be this or that sect, then good, good for them. But us Western people who don't really have the cultural background for it to really matter, I just don't think it makes sense to limit the exploration to any one stream of Dharma transmission. But whatever. I've been trying to provide context before I get into Thich Nhat Hanh's commentary, and I've been trying to give time for people on Facebook to see the posts that I shared about the live video. But I doubt my posts are going very far. So I'm just going to read now. When we meet a person, what we really meet is our own habit energy, and it prevents us from seeing anything else. Perhaps when we first met this person, we had a negative reaction to him. We formed a habit energy of how we relate to him on the basis of that, our experience, our conditioning. And we continue to relate to him that way. Every time we look at him, we see the same old person, even if he has changed completely. Our habit energies keep us from being able to perceive the reality, the ultimate reality of the present moment. Our habit energies keep us from being able to perceive the reality of the present moment. That's what I've been talking about. These habit energies were initiated by delusion, self, and they will be dismantled by understanding or wisdom. Thich Nhat Hanh usually calls it understanding, and it helps to make sense of what it really is. I also like the word wisdom, though. Ooh, it's raining now. We are influenced by the actions and beliefs of our parents and of society and of our past experiences, and many Buddhists believe our past lives. But our reactions to things have their own patterns, and we are caught in these patterns. This is our habit energy. It's been accumulating since the beginning of beginningless time, according to Buddhist cosmology. Our habit energies are the fruit of our behavior, formed by our reactions to things and also by our environment. So it's the fruit of our behavior. It's how we actually act. We tend to get into patterns of doing the same things over and over again. And mindfulness is one of the best tools for breaking bad habits. For people like me, at least, I was addicted to every drug. And the Buddha helped me out where other people could not help me out. And it had a lot to do with just mindfulness. Just being aware of what's happening now and what I'm doing now. That alone helped me. And what we're learning here is the mechanics of why that works. When a person is brought up in a certain environment, a habit energy is formed. Many children today have the habit energy of watching TV. They are unhappy when they are brought somewhere where there is no television. One boy, when he came to Plum Village and discovered that there was no television, he wanted his mom to take him away. And today it would be phones or tablets or TVs. We convinced him to stay for half a day, and during that time, many other children played with him. After a few hours, he agreed to stay longer. He ended up staying for 3 weeks. He discovered that he could be happy without television. So his action got him used to watching TV. Habit energy arose and became stronger. But then his action changed. He didn't watch TV. And then it turned out he enjoyed not watching TV and being there at Plum Village. So this is just a fruit of what he does. And when the Buddha teaches about action, he puts a lot of emphasis on intention. So intention would be the mind gate of karma. And intention flavors the speech or the physical deed. So the Buddha was different than the leader of the Jains. The leader of the Jains didn't have an emphasis on intention. The action alone was what was significant. And there are interesting results of that difference. Like the Jains are those people who walk around with the brushes so they don't harm a single creature as they walk, the brooms. And they, use filters so they don't take any microorganisms into their body when they drink water. Things like that. Because they don't have the same understanding of intent, the role of intention. Buddhist monks are different. They have this understanding that intention is important. And it makes sense because it makes sense from the perspective of what we're learning about the mind system, because what the mind does nourishes or plants a seed. If the mind isn't involved in an action, the mind isn't planting seeds or nourishing seeds. If the action is just like a random sound, speech, or maybe you accidentally step on an ant, it's of a different nature because the intention is not there. And I'm just trying to make sense of why the Buddha would put such emphasis on the intention behind speech and physical deeds. So, habits form, perceptual habits form, habits of mind, habits of speech, habits of physical action, and habits become strong. The store consciousness receives and maintains our action, maintains it as habit energy, so it can just build and build and build. The addiction just grows. And all of this stuff relates to addiction. And all of this stuff is what helped me personally. And I recognize that many people are many different ways, unique, diverse. I don't think that what works for me will always work for everyone. But if you're like me, it might work. So, habits can change, and that is the good news. It is possible for us to change our habits. And in fact, in order to transform, we must change our habits. And here, this is where we're in the territory of ethical discipline, or sila. Changing our habits. This is right action. One of the elements of the Eightfold Path. And right action is described by this formula or set called the 4 right strivings. Habits can be changed. We can change them, and so we should, because we know the pain of suffering. We have maitri or metta, and we have compassion. We have mudita or sympathetic joy, and impartiality. So we don't want to hurt anything. We don't want to hurt ourselves either. So we engage in right action with the 4 right strivings. And they are, I desire to abandon unwholesome, harmful, unskillful, unprofitable actions. And I'm just using different words for bad actions. I will abandon the bad actions I'm doing now. And then the second one is, I will continually abstain from those unwholesome, harmful, unprofitable actions. And the third is, I desire, because all of them start with I desire to pick up new wholesome actions that I'm not currently engaged in. And the fourth is, I desire to continue with the wholesome actions I am currently engaged in. So yeah, I'm just trying to give background into what Thich is talking about here. It's good news. We can change our habits, and we should, because we don't want to hurt people or animals or the earth. All of it comes down to our habits, especially Americans. Our habit energy is literally bleeding the world dry. the world and all of her children. And this is engaged Buddhism. Thich Nhat Hanh teaches engaged Buddhism. This is not all rainbows and butterflies. When we live with mindfulness, we do not only become aware of happy, pleasant things. And I see a tendency on the internet as I go around, just based on, how people engage with content. I see a tendency to avoid the heart of Buddhism. Suffering. It matters. And we can do a lot. All of us, like working on yourself. But it means saving the planet with your practice of Buddhism. And just engaging in right action alone, you can save the world. And you'll experience happiness. Higher and higher happinesses. And that's another thing I see on the Buddhist internet is people saying that Buddhism has nothing to do with worldly happiness. That we don't practice Buddhism to be happy. And I just think they're confused. Because in the source texts, the Pali Suttas, the Mahayana Sutras, the Buddha is very clear. There is happiness on this path. There are even wholesome desires, the 4 right strivings, which I just listed out for you. They're desires, I desire to abandon unwholesome action, let go of all harmful action, and continually stay away from harming beings. I desire to do helpful things. I desire to continually do helpful things. It is great news. We can transform our habits, and we should. Through the practice of mindfulness, which is another way of transforming habits, there I was describing like a top-down approach. It's like, here are the things I do not want to do. Here are the things I do want to do. But when we focus on mindfulness, then we kind of do it from the other side because we're aware of every little thing we do. If we live mindfully, we are aware of what's happening and what we're doing about it. And a lot of this practice emerges from the realization that every action is the most important action. Every little thing, little greed turns into great suffering for everyone if it's cultivated, nourished. So if we work on ourselves continually and delight in virtue, is what they say, we will catch things before they grow up big and tangle up the mind system. So the easiest way to do this is with a group of good friends, Kalyana Mitras, a Sangha, people who practice mindfulness together. And here I've been Sangha building on Facebook. And I had support from Facebook, but it doesn't seem like I have that support anymore. And Facebook is kind of frustrating, so I'm moving my Sangha building activities to YouTube. It's just an example. We are doing this. I care about your practice and I want to hear about it. And you'll hear about my practice, so we can help each other. If we put ourselves in an environment where we can practice with other people and practicing in person together is wonderful, but not everybody has access to that. And so I will be here to fill the gap. We will be able to alter our habit energies together effectively. Through the practice of mindfulness, we can identify the seeds in us and help others identify the seeds in them. And we can recognize the habit energies that go along with them and the results of those habit energies, which, when they're unwholesome habit energies arising from, the seeds of greed and hatred and delusion, the results of those habit energies are pain and suffering for everyone eventually. And sometimes I get frustrated about the wealthy business people of the USA because they're a primary source of the world's suffering. But I don't hate them. I can see that these seeds have been watered. And I would like those people to see those seeds, and the way they are, those people themselves are hurt by those seeds. And part of the reason this is important to me is because there are people who are close to me that I know and love deeply who hurt in this way, chasing after wealth. It's not different than a heroin addict. It hurts the family. It hurts the world. So I'm not a hater of people, but the Buddha's teachings on ethical discipline do matter to me. And it is possible to see the seeds that are stored and active in other people's minds. A while ago, earlier in this book, Thich Nhat talking all about that. When we look at the early Buddhist teachings on mind, it's common knowledge that we can read each other's minds. With training, they say, we can know with certainty another's mind. I don't think I can do that, but I do think it's possible to see through people's speech and physical action what's going on in their mind. There's suffering there. Actions that cause suffering are usually supported by that being's own suffering. But that's no reason to excuse the behavior. That person, if they hurt you, needs to know that you've been hurt. And in this case, what I'm talking about with our society and with all these homeless people around me and all these other people with more than they could ever use, real people are being hurt, and it does matter, and it could be fixed. But greed is normal here. So yeah, I'm just explaining this is part of my practice, and you'll hear my thoughts on the world if you listen to my videos. If our family and friends are unstable, they will also affect our consciousness. That is why it is important to choose carefully who we spend time with, when we talk with someone who is unhappy, our stored consciousness will receive the seeds of her suffering. If we aren't careful to maintain our own wholesome seeds during the conversation, her suffering will water the seeds of suffering in us, and we will feel exhausted. And we've all probably felt that. It's not like this is an excuse to ignore suffering, though. We just need to know our own limits and develop practices to restabilize, recenter, chill out, clarify, and take breaks. So we don't become exhausted, because this bodhisattva path is long. If you want to be in it for the long haul, you got to take rests. And over time, as your practice develops, your mind clarifies, your conduct purifies, you get more energy. More energy to engage suffering with the Dharma. And the bodhisattvas go on and on like this until all beings are liberated from suffering forever in all universes. So that's a huge goal. It's a huge task. We better take breaks or we won't be able to complete the task. The practice of mindfulness allows us to create new, more functional habit energies. Suppose that when we hear a certain phrase, we grimace and cringe. It's not that we want to make a face, it just happens automatically. To replace this old habit with a new one, every time we hear that phrase, we breathe consciously. So this is conditioning. We are conditioning ourselves, reconditioning. We notice, because we're mindful, that whenever we hear this phrase or whenever we hear this person say anything, we cringe. We can do that unconsciously for a long time, but then we live mindfully and notice. And so we want to change it. And so we recondition ourselves. Whenever we hear that phrase or see that person, we breathe consciously. And this is the same process that's involved in learning to listen to the mindfulness bell. So whenever you hear the bell, you stop and breathe consciously. Over time, whenever you hear the bell, you stop and breathe consciously automatically, because you created new habit energies. But you can do this with anything. Any perception can be a mindfulness bell. Even unpleasant perceptions. So whenever you see a person without a house living on the side of the road, breathe consciously. If you breathe consciously, you can stabilize your mind and you might be able to do something helpful. And that's the end of this page, which is all soaking wet. So I'm gonna stop reading now and wander home. Thank you for studying this wonderful Dharma with me. Just talking about it as I read, it helps me learn. So thank you. And I hope it was useful for you in your practice. And I'll be back tomorrow. So, bye-bye.